Everybody, well, welcome back to another episode of the Blazer Victory Podcast. John Duncan here, and of course, I'm joined as always with both of my co-hosts, Darian Smith and Jimmy Marion, and we've got a special guest for you all today. UAB Athletic Director Mark Ingram joins the show, and welcome aboard, Mark.
Hey, how you doing, guys?
Good. And before we get into business, this episode and all episodes of the Blazer Victory Podcast are brought to you by Cahaba Brewing Company, and we are going to spotlight the Oka Uba IPA today for today's show. And Blazer fans, don't forget, Blazer Victory fans, Tuesday night, 6 o'clock, join us at Cahaba Brewing Company to cheer on the UAB Blazers as they take on the East Carolina Pirates. So come on down, 6 o'clock. Weather should be, fingers crossed, good. So, join us at Cahaba Brewing Company this Tuesday night.
Hey, John, before you jump off that, you see the polo? This Cahaba Brewing polo I got on, the sweet one. I don't know if you can see the back's got Cahaba on the back.
Oh, dang, I didn't know they did the back logo. Heck yeah.
That's what's up. Yeah, little Christmas gift, so got to represent Cahaba.
Yes, definitely. Well, Mark, welcome on the show in the Blazer Victory Podcast. And how have things been for you lately?
Good, really good. I appreciate you having me on, John. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Jimmy. Good to see you guys. Thanks, Darian. Things are great. We're in the middle of basketball season, as you know, and about to start baseball and softball. The ladies' women's basketball is right around the middle of. We had a close loss last night, Wednesday night. The ladies lost here at home to East Carolina. So, yeah, the guys, as you mentioned, they're going to travel to East Carolina this coming week. So, anyway, but the guys are sitting in second place, men's basketball second place. Memphis is in first. They beat us. They had a really good game. I went up to Memphis for the game. They played really well. One of their staff members said walking out, I just kind of bumped into him in the hallway, and he was like, I said, hey, congrats. You guys are good. And he said, we just played the best game I've seen us play in a long, long time. And so appreciate them saving that for us.
Yeah.
But we're going to get them back here. We've got 4 more home games, and we get Memphis back here March the 2nd. So, and then March 6th is our last game against Florida Atlantic. So 4 more home games. We really need people to pack it out. We had a good crowd the other night against North Texas in a great basketball game. That's the only other loss that we've got. We lost at North Texas, but then we beat them here. So we were tied with them for second. They had the tie break. Now we are in second place. So really exciting. You know, Andy's team is much better, I think, than their record. We lost some games, some non-conference games early that we should have won. And we were just ice cold shooting. I mean, I know you guys come to a lot of our games, and early on, I remember our very first game against Vermont. We were 0 for 10 from 3. 0 for 10. If you make 1, we probably win the game. We lost another game one night at home, and we were 59% from the free throw line. I mean, that's abysmal. We could have been 65%, which is still horrible, and we would have won that game. So we lost a bunch of close games to some teams if we played again, I'm confident we'd beat. But we didn't. So taking our lumps there, but I think the team is playing a lot better, shooting a lot better, and, they're running Andy's system a lot better than they were.
Yeah. So when you were talking, you said you had bumped into a Memphis staffer, right?
Yeah.
In my head, I was hoping that when you said that you bumped into him, and it was,
say it with your chest. Say it with your
chest. That's what I was picturing. So I'm going to go with that. And
you can. It wasn't quite like that. That makes you feel better. Go ahead.
But also, first, before we get deep off into the basketball talk, I wanted to say how much I respect you for coming on this platform. And I don't know too many ADs, right, that'll go out here and we're a podcast, we're a fan podcast in a sense, but I don't know how many ADs would come and take that time with us and talk genuinely. We've met with you before, but I would say I don't care if some people disagree. I know a lot of criticisms and a lot of praise going on with your job. It's a tough job, every decision you make is going to come with some kind of opinion from a lot of people, right? But I respect you taking your time. You know, you've been meeting with fans, you've been hearing people out. And to me, that take a lot of cojones, right? You know, it takes a lot. So I do respect that, and I do appreciate that. So we appreciate your time.
Sure.
And then for the people, I know we have the whole credential thing go on. We don't feel like that's a thing to talk about here right now at this moment. We just talked about we're talking about the basketball team. We're going to talk about a lot more, but that is being addressed. Meetings are going on, so calm down. We aren't ducking anything. Mark, our AD doesn't duck anything, right? So we're getting that out the way. But yeah, so now that that's out, now that that is done with, I want to go more into the basketball team, right? One thing I don't like about college basketball in a sense, but I understand, especially for G5 teams, is if you kind of lose some of those early non-com games, right? It kind of takes away the chance for an at-large bid.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to do, and it can take away momentum, right? But one thing I do want to remind people of, like last year, of the special run we had with under kind of the same circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see kind of a similarity in that sense of this team to last year's team, and we can probably have the same outcome?
Yeah, I definitely do. And Andy's teams, if we look back at his time here, he sort of has done that. You know, they sort of peaked near the end of the season every year, which is what you want. Yeah, it's unfortunate that having lost so many of those non-conference games, we've really lost the opportunity for an at-large at this point. But I think that the team this year, if we can just start making a few more outside shots, then I think we're already hard to beat. But if we can start making just a few outside shots, we don't have to be the best in the league. Our defense is great. We score a lot in the paint. We steal a lot. We don't turn it over a ton. I mean, certain nights we do, but our assist to turnover ratio is really good. And everybody knows that we're more talented, I think, than most of the teams. And then where we maybe lack some talent, we play hard and we scheme, and I think we have the best coach in the league. In my opinion, we have the best coach in the league by far. And I've told him that. I've told anybody that, you know, that I'm not insulting by saying that. And I really think that. So that helps, right? I mean, I do think that matters. And he's very intense. He can't stand to lose. Andy is funny to me in that I think he actually is hoping that at some point we are going to have a game and we're going to score like 130 points. We're not going to miss one shot, and we'll win like 130-0. And if that happens, then his life will be fulfilled. But until that happens, I really don't think that he's going to be terribly happy. It's like sometimes every time they score, I'm like, dude, we're up 20. And and he's mad. I'm like, Andy, there's a minute left. But it's the principle of the matter. And he can't, you know, so he really is driven. And like, he'll even talk in those games where we are up big and we sort of clear the end of the bench. And in the locker room, he'll say, hey, look, you guys got an opportunity to go in the game. I expect you to go play basketball. This isn't goof around time. I want you to go, prove to me that you ought to be getting on the court, at other times of the game. And so he doesn't stop coaching, man, from the time that game starts till it's over with. He is in it, and his intensity is easy to see if you're watching the game.
I'm glad that you brought up the question related to similarities between this year's team and last year, Darian, because that was something I was looking at too. And I think through 10 games this past year, UAB was 7-3 in conference. Now we're 8-2 in conference this year. And I believe we've got a little less than a handful of games, maybe 4 home games remaining. Looking back at last year's schedule, we had gained some momentum early in conference, and we had some hiccups. If y'all remember, I think it was Wichita State at home, Rice at home, where we dropped some games. And then the team responded though. You know, the team responded, and I was looking at the schedule and remembering that they had went on a nice streak there at the end, 4 or 5 games, whatever it was, to solidify that 4 seed. But, you know, it's going to be really interesting to watch this UAB basketball team and see if they can keep momentum. ECU, we've talked about it. We've referenced it a couple of times. That's a big game. Any road game in conference is going to be hard, and AK stated that. So that'll be opportunity number 1. But throughout the rest of this season, we talked about at large being lost, and that's a reality at this point, likely. But there's so much to play for. There's so many reasons for. We know if you're listening to this podcast, you're a UAB crazy fan. But as y'all are talking to your family members and your friends, and you're thinking like, should I be coming to games the rest of the year, or should I stay home and watch another team on TV? There's so many reasons to come watch this UAB basketball team play. You see a player, a generational talent like a Yaxwell Lindenborg that's finishing out his career at UAB and playing the way that he is, and these other guys that came back from a championship team with an opportunity to repeat. And AK said it recently about you know, controlling your own destiny and how big that North Texas win was, because you still control your own destiny. You still get a Memphis at home later in the season. And so you've put yourself in position to cut down nets and to still have big moments. And so for anybody that is listening to this show and is contemplating like attending games, supporting the team, whether that be through collective support or, you know, in-person support, right now there's a lot of reasons to take advantage of this positive momentum, and hopefully the team can have one heck of a end to the season and replicate what they did last year.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah, the tournament's back in Fort Worth this year, and then going to move. We haven't determined where it's going to go to yet, but it's going to move, and I believe the folks at the BJCC were hoping to bid on it. So who knows? Maybe we'll get it here in Birmingham, which would be fun. But yeah, this year back in Fort Worth at a place called Dickey's Arena. Nobody plays there. It's not TCU's arena. It's just a, you know, an open facility for, you know, they have a lot of rodeo events, I think. At least that's what it smells like when you go in. But it's a really nice building. I'd say that in jest, kind of, but it's a really good looking building, and Fort Worth's a fun place to go. So yeah, hopefully we'll get some people to travel down there again. But Jimmy, thank you for saying that. We got 4 more home games, and it really matters, man. We had a good crowd the other night against North Texas, but it was an 8 p.m. start because it was what they call Big Monday television game. So that's great. That's exciting, because we wouldn't have that if we weren't, you know, good. But that time, I think a lot of our season ticket holders sort of were like, oh man, that's late. I'm just going to stay home. And so that's noticed. A lot of the empty seats on both sides, lower level kind of sideline, if you will, those are all sold. So those empty seats are season ticket holders who chose not to come or couldn't come, you know, and didn't make arrangements for somebody else to be in their seats. And so I just want to keep encouraging our existing ticket holders to just please come out and support. We appreciate their financial support by buying the tickets, but please use the tickets. If you can't yourself, use them, give them to a friend or neighbor or somebody that'll go. And if you haven't been, as Jimmy said, they're a ton of fun to watch. It's exciting basketball.
And Mark, that's a great transition that I was going to ask you. Obviously, 4 more home games, factors out of your control. You just mentioned an 8:00 tip, an ESPN2 broadcast. Do you think that, or do you feel that the marketing at UAB, do you think you guys might try different marketing techniques in the future to try to get those casual Birmingham fans into Bartow Arena?
Yeah, I think we have constant discussions, John, about what is the most effective. You don't see us do a lot of billboard stuff. We don't do a lot of television, what you might consider linear television, sort of standard, what we all grew up with, television ads. We spend the bulk of our money on digital marketing. So even though it kind of annoys me personally when this happens, but if you get on the ESPN app, it might, you know, pop up or something. We do a lot of that kind of thing. One of the reasons we like that is it tracks. If you click through and go buy the tickets, it tracks, like if we spend $1, we made $3, versus other forms of traditional advertising, you can't really do that. Though those might be more effective. And I think the real answer is what you want to do is a little bit of all of it, to the best you can with your budget. We sometimes have our best crowds when we kind of like guerrilla style get out on the campus and just like walk around to the cafeteria and go, hey, there's a basketball game tonight, come. Like our best attended games by the students are stuff like that. We just go over to the Commons cafeteria and, with signs and banners and, hey, you come to the game tonight? Hey, you come to the game tonight? How about you come to the game? Do that. And they kind of catch the kids off guard. But, man, they just get busy doing like anybody else. You get busy with life. If you have children, I've got 4. You guys have kids. And, you got the soccer game, the t-ball game, the parent meeting, the theater, whatever play at the school tonight. And then you go, oh, my gosh, is that the same night as the and, you're just trying to catch your breath sometimes. So you got to be like constantly, reminding people when it is. But it's not ideal. I wish we had a little bit more money to spend it more robustly on marketing. I'd like to believe it would help. It may not. I don't know. But we're an exciting team to watch for sure.
Yeah, I think that was a great question, just to kind of see exactly where the money goes in marketing and help people understand. And speaking on money and everything, I wanted to transition into like, you got Yaks, right? You got Christian Coleman, Vasquez, all these type of guys. But I think they all could have chosen to go somewhere else, right? And just and possibly make however thousands of dollars, right? Especially Yaks. In this day of age of we saw that happen to FAU, right? In this day of age, do you think we will ever see loyalty like that again, like loyalty in sports in general? Do you think that's even possible? And I just want to put that out there because I want fans to understand why we should support this iteration of the team, because I honestly don't know if we'll ever see anything like that again. So do you think that's still a thing or will be a thing in the future?
Yeah. So Andy says, had we not won the championship last year, he thinks winning the championship is what kept the team together, because they were able to, hey, let's do it again. Let's stay together and do it again. And, South Florida's team, the entire starting 5 and a couple of others, they won the regular season and they all left. They all got in the transfer portal. They all left, and they beat they were undefeated in the league minus their games against us. We were the only team that beat them, and we beat them 2 or 3 times. But otherwise, they beat everybody else in the league. The point is, so it wasn't like, they live in Tampa. How bad could that be? So they probably are living in a great place, and the team was good, so they won a lot. So you couldn't be unhappy. Their coach was the coach of the year. People said, he passed away, right before the season started as a young man. But everybody said he was a great guy. So you think, well, so why'd they leave? Well, because different people had money that South Florida didn't have that they lured them away with. And I tell you who on the topic that you bring up, Darian, Butta Johnson and Tony, they are really the rare ones. Mm-hmm. Those guys came here out of high school and are still here. They're the ones that you just don't ever see anymore. And look, I don't have anything against the transfer guys. We've benefited greatly from some of these transfers, and we'll continue to do that. But coming out of high school and being at the same place your entire career, I don't know about that anymore. Because you look at football, what's happened to us the last couple of years. Cam Shanks had no offers, and Nick Saban calls Trent Dilfer and says, the best player in our state is a guy named Cam Shanks. He's down at Prattville High School. He's just too small for us, but he's just really an incredibly talented player. You ought to take a look at him. So we do. He is a small guy, but he's got a lot of talent, as Coach Saban said. We bring him here. He redshirts. We, put a little weight on him. He plays 1 year. He is the dynamic player we think he can be. He's an All-American and gets $200,000 to go somewhere else. And he's not mad. that's what I think is really interesting about the conversation in recruiting. And you didn't ask me about football, but, kind of thinking about recruiting, which we're also just sort of wrapping up on the football side, is the 8 or 9 guys that were impact players that we lost. Not any of them were mad. They didn't leave here because they were angry. They didn't burn the house down on their way out. Forget you guys. I hate this. There was none of that. They just got paid, man. They got paid a lot of money. Get one guy gets almost $300,000 to go to Georgia, another guy $150 to go to Indiana, $200 to go to Arkansas, $100 to go to Houston. I mean, and we have money to pay some guys. We just don't have that kind of money to pay guys. And, we lose our starting center to Virginia. I mean, and some of them are going and taking these opportunities, knowing full well they will likely be a backup. But it's money that, one guy said, he goes, look, I know I'm not going to play in the NFL, so I'm never going to make money from football, but I'm being told I can make money. This will be my only opportunity for 1 year to go make money somewhere. Feel like I should go do that. And we go, hug the dude and go, good luck. Hope it works out. Don't blame you. And
right.
So then what you got to do, what's really hard, I think, on high school kids is if we lose 8 or 9 impact players, we got to go find and replace them with other people that can play immediately, which means that's not a high school kid, likely. The high school kids are what we would deem as projects, not always, but usually a developmental situation that we know he needs to be a little bit bigger, that kind of thing, a little stronger, understand the speed of the game, which is very different. But occasionally you've got a kid, and we think we have a couple of the high school kids that we sign in football that could really make an impact early. But the point is, that's why you got to go to the portal, and you got to get a guy from junior college, FCS, kind of the second stringer from a Power 4 that's just not getting on the field as much as they want. Try to get these guys to come in and make the impact, because that's what you got to have, guys that can play immediately. There's just not this developmental time, over a 4 or 5 year ramp up. That just doesn't exist anymore.
Hey, Mark, you've got us excited about football, and we're kind of starting to transition, and the large majority of our audience are listeners and supporters of UAB football. Yeah. And so as we kind of start to make that transition, can you share some exciting news with us as it relates to like the spring football schedule, what we have to look forward to as it relates to that?
Yeah, so one of the things that has nothing to do with us, we will take full credit for this, but we had nothing to do with it. The university's academic calendar is about 2 weeks later than it was last year. Now, why does that matter? Well, it mattered in January because the transfer portal, how can I explain this? You can get in the portal when you hear about the transfer portal window, that's when you can get in. You can come out anytime, okay? You don't have to go in and come out inside that window. So the portal window closed on the 29th of December. And then if your school, wherever your school is, if they start class on, I don't know, January 5th or 6th, which I think Tuscaloosa might have, but we didn't start till the 13th. And why does that matter? Well, that basically gave us another week to recruit. Once school starts, we have a good relationship with our admissions people, but if today is day 1 and Jimmy is visiting, he just got in the portal on the 29th. He's at Iowa State. He just got in the portal on the 29th. He doesn't know where he wants to go. He's got to take some visits, but we start school on the 6th of January. That's not a lot of time. Remember, you got holidays and New Year's and all this stuff that's happening. That's not a lot of time to take those visits. And so ultimately, Jimmy's going to be here. Like I said, let's pretend we start on the 6th or whatever. He might be visiting on the 6th. He hasn't even applied for school yet, right? So if you have, in our case, the 13th, that actually gave us a little bit more time than some schools. Now, like I think Ole Miss, they didn't start for like 2 weeks more after us. So they had even more time. That's an advantage in transfer portal recruiting, because you're not up against school starting. Like ultimately, the player has to be successful in the classroom to be eligible to play for us next year. So he can't miss the whole first week of school. And so anyway, so that was positive for us, one thing. The second thing is it was about a week later on the start, but it's about 2 weeks later on the back end. The calendar, Okay, so again, why does that matter? There's another spring portal window. We will be practicing. We backed our practice up. We'll be practicing during that time, which we think is to our advantage. Now we'll see, but you're still meaning you're still engaged on a daily basis, routinely with the players. When practice ended last year, and then the portal opened, all of a sudden it's like, we hadn't put our hands on them today. Where are they? Who's talking to them? You know, you feel like you lost some control, and you kind of have when they're not with you, like literally sitting next to you. And so we're going to have our spring event back at the facility on April 26th. Don't have a time yet, but we know baseball and softball both have home games that day. So we'll try to create a whole, weekend or Saturday event around that. Last year, I thought it was the first time we had tried this, and I thought it was a good start. It was a bit of more like a festival. Inflatables, food trucks, music, this kind of thing was fun. And, it's really good for families, really good for kids. And we did practice some football under the pavilion, which you could kind of stand on the sidelines and watch. And, but more than anything, like during the practice, there'd be a dad with a little kid who they'd wander off to the bounce house because the 4-year-olds are like, I don't even know what I'm watching today. So they'd go off to the bounce house for a while and then come back and watch some football. And I thought it was really fun. We'll try to build on that again this year. But, we've signed, I think it was 21. You guys are going to correct me, I hope, if I'm wrong. 21.
That sounds right.
Portal guys and another 10 high school guys. And we still have about 10 scholarships available. So again, strategically, why is that? Because there's a spring portal, and something that you may or may not know, and this is just wild to me. And like Darian, this wasn't a thing when you played. Heck, this wasn't a thing 2 years ago. So some of the higher resourced programs in the Big Ten and the SEC, and probably beyond, but I have specific examples from those places. They were using all 85 of their scholarships, and then they would have a guy that was, call it a bubble guy, who was going to go to Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, UAB, whatever. And they were calling them late, right before they signed. So the first Wednesday of February historically used to be signing day. So call it the weekend before that. They'd call one of these kids and they'd say, hey, John, this is Coach whatever from, big SEC school. I know we've never talked to you before, but we want you to take a visit. What? Oh, and you get excited, take a visit. We're talking about, we're going to bring you on an official visit. Now, it used to be that you could only have 56 official visits as a school. We could only bring in 56 total kids that we pay to visit. You want to visit unofficially, that means you pay your way. You can have as many of those you want. Well, with the new transfer rules, meaning that kids can transfer every single semester, if you're like Marshall and you lose 80 guys, 56 visits isn't going to fill your roster back up. So now there's an unlimited visit for each school. We can bring in as many as we need to fill what we lost. So they bring a kid in. So, John, come in for a visit. Well, you're excited. Yeah, we're going to go in. They go, John, hey, listen, we don't have any scholarships left. And you got offers to, like I said, let's just say UAB, Western Kentucky, and Middle Tennessee. Here's what we want to do, though, John. We're going to give you $40,000 from our collective, and that's going to cover your tuition. So essentially, you are on scholarship. We're going to give you $40,000 a year to cover
to get around, yeah.
And we're going to treat you the same as if you were one of the 85. Now, some schools have like 3 of those. Some have 10. But through the new House settlement, which we haven't even gotten into, this thing that we anticipate happening in April, there's a roster limit in football of 105 players. Well, the average number of football players nationally is about 120. That's what most people operate with. So when we all have to shrink to 105, there's going to be some dudes like what I just described that have no home. The coach is going to have to say, John, man, we did this deal with you 2 years ago, and we love having you, but we got to shrink the roster. We don't have room for you. So there's going to be some good football players available, that we would have signed a year or two ago, but that chose to go that other route. So we've got a little space there, for some guys who become available through something like that, or just sort of what we've been experiencing, people that go through the spring and thought they were going to become the starter at whatever place and go, hey, man, I feel like I could start at UAB instead. So we'll pick them up. So we still got a little space, to fill the roster.
Yeah, so we speak that it's so many topics that we went through. I was like, I was gonna ask about that in kind of way. So like, and you brought up the house settlement, and we got rev share coming up, and I just saw it came across on like an ESPN alert, right? The SEC paid out like $52.6 million to each of their schools in the conference. $52.6 million.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here, I'm thinking like, man, I wonder how the house settlement, what that does for the quote unquote G5 or G4 programs, for programs like UAB and AAC. What is the future of college football like for specifically those type of schools, and how much does that do? The stuff like that, when I read it, it kind of worries me. But at the same time, I wonder if it's going to be brought under control, and I'm just trying to make sense of it. What are your ideas of it?
Yeah, the what you saw, I saw that article too. That's the distribution from the conference. So if they each got 52, whatever you said, 52.5 million this year from the American Conference, we're going to get 3.5. Okay, so that tells you how much difference there is in dollars to operate. Dollars to operate is how you pay your coaches, how you travel, how you eat, the clothes you put on the kids, the uniforms, and that kind of stuff. That's where that money goes. You can have more staff. So when you say, well, what do you need more staff for? Well, stuff. You could have more money for marketing, what we talked about earlier. What you are able to use that money for, there are infinite needs. Something this is in the weeds, but like deferred maintenance. Like, how often we need to replace the carpet in a locker room because the kids walk in cleats, and it's not their fault. They're not doing anything wrong. They're not even mistreating the space. But, well, it's expensive, and when you got to do that several times a year, or, if they go, hey, we got to replace the turf on the field, it's $1 million for a field. And so those monies that difference goes a long way for a lot of different things. The house settlement we anticipate is definitely going to happen. Where they really are going to separate further is that they're all going to get, the SEC is going to get, and the Big Ten are going to get like $20 million more dollars from the college football playoff than what they got a year ago. That's the anticipation. 20 million. We're going to get about 200,000 more than what we got last year. And so it's being sort of engineered, this separation, this pull apart. When people talk about super conferences, boy, the differences are so great. Whether you're talking about the basketball tournament and people go, we really are very different. We've engineered that difference. And the reason that those teams are getting so much more money, how about this? So the NCAA doesn't manage the CFP. They manage every championship in all sports except football. The college football playoff is its own separate entity. That's its own organization. They manage the football championship. So when the contracts were being signed last spring for how will the new 12 team, what's the format, right? Like, okay, you got your top conference champions and one at large, and that whole thing. And then it also included the financial distribution. Well, we knew that what is now the Power 4 leagues were going to get more money, but there was this thing that we had only sort of kind of read about called the House lawsuit that we weren't named in. And they were saying, look, man, we're going to have to cover this lawsuit. It's going to be a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit. So we're going to try to help those teams cover that expense. That's why they need so much more money. Okay. But the lawsuit wasn't with the CFP. The lawsuit was with the NCAA. So when the NCAA goes to settle, they included all of us. because we're all member institutions and we've all received financial benefit from the NCAA, mainly the men's basketball tournament. And so all of a sudden we've got to take on part of the back pay of that settlement, even though we weren't even named in the lawsuit. So they just got paid, the Power Four got paid all this money from the CFP with an anticipation they were going to cover it all by themselves. But then the NCAA, who's actually the lawsuit with, they go, no, we're going to spread it out, everyone. So we got hit twice. We didn't get the money, but we had to share in the expense. So those separations continue to happen. And it's disheartening. It's disheartening mainly for the Olympic sports. That's what I worry about. Here in about 2 years, I worry that a bunch of schools there's schools in those Power Four leagues that are already reducing scholarships with some of their Olympic teams. Wrestling, swimming, track, they're already doing it to have money, to pay more money to their football players. And their ADs are saying to me, I'm like, man, y'all been good at, pick the sport, y'all been good at lacrosse. Man, your school's got a good history with lacrosse. Yeah, but if I don't win in football, it don't matter. They're just going to fire me. If I don't win in basketball, I got to get basketball right. If I don't get it right, it ain't going to matter. Nobody cares. The only people that care about that sport is their alumni and a couple of local people. And so it will make our Olympic teams, the actual Olympics that happen every 2 years, they will suffer. The American Olympic team the U.S. Olympic team is definitely going to suffer because we're basically the breeding ground. We are the training ground for all those athletes, particularly the summer kids, the summer athletes, the track, the swimmers. So that's way out there. But the house settlement is expensive. It's going to cost UAB $416,000 a year for the next 10 years. That's back pay to Power Four athletes in football and men's basketball. And so the only kid that went to UAB that will benefit from that money, like that's literally not going to any kids that played at UAB unless in the last 10 years they were at a Power Four and transferred here, or the opposite, were here and then went to a Power Four, and they'll get a share, based on the number of years they were at that place. It's wild, man. And so now there's revenue sharing, which you asked about. So not to confuse with NIL. If Full Moon Barbecue or Cahaba Brewing wants to pay one of our kids to do a commercial, that can still happen. That is the use of their name, image, likeness. Collectives like Southside Solutions and Magic City Impact, they still have a place. But what will happen now, and this is, I think, actually beneficial on some level, is that you could make a donation to the athletic department and we can take that money. It's tax deductible for you, which is not giving to the collective. So that's been hard. But you can give it to us. It's tax deductible. And then we can pay the athlete from our general fund to assist with compensating the players. So we're working through exactly. I don't want to get in too deep there because we're working through how to do all that. But everybody in our league and around the country is trying to figure out their best mechanism to make that happen.
And Mark, while we're on revenue distribution, and we can segue into the NIL, but obviously we're grateful for the American Athletic Conference.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that 3.5 million number. How hard is it recruiting for these sports when Tulane and Memphis are bringing in 8, 9, like triple the amount of revenue that UAB and the other 5 teams that we brought over from the Conference USA? Like, how hard is that for recruiting?
Very. And I should say this, John, the other Conference USA teams financially in terms of distribution are the same as us. So I get that question a lot, like us versus them. Just so you know, the 6 from COSA, we're all the same. UAB didn't negotiate better or worse than Charlotte or Florida Atlantic. We're all the same. What they call the incumbent members, which is those already there, East Carolina, Temple, Memphis, Tulane, Tulsa, South Florida. They this year, we're going to get 3.5. They're going to get 7.5 to 8. Okay. So that's a significant difference. And having the money to bring in kids on those official visit weekends are $3,000 or $4,000 a kid. And so if you got to sign 30 kids, you probably got to do 60 visits, 90 visits. Just do the math. Like, it's a lot of money. And again, going back to even just 18 months ago, 2 years ago, when you couldn't transfer all like you can now, it used to be seriously, before a year and a half ago, pre-Trent Dilfer, you couldn't transfer without sitting out a year. You had to sit out a year. And so that really slowed it down. Very few kids transferred. Some did, but not that much. And during the time that football had gone away, that fall of 15 and 16, when we weren't playing, it didn't matter. A kid could transfer here and they could sit out that year. And then we also separately, we got a waiver for it not to count against them. So, back in 17, we had kids that were in their 4th or 5th year of college and they were coded as freshmen. So, we've had a lot of unique things here to help us be successful. But with the transferring, that you just wouldn't have this kind of movement, and you didn't need to have as many visits, right? So we have call it 20 naturally graduate that we expected, but then you have another 20 go into the portal. You got to fill 40 dudes. You can't do that with 56 visits, like I was saying earlier. And so the benefit that we used to have in recruiting, where we mostly recruited high school kids, well, the talent in our state and the talent within, call it 4 or 5 hours of Birmingham, is so good that we didn't have to get on airplanes to go fly all over the place to recruit. We could get in the car and just drive, over here to Parker High School or Ramsey High School or Thompson High School or Trussville, or, you know what I mean? Like, we got a lot of people right here that we can choose from. Go to Atlanta, it's 2 hours away, right? Mississippi junior colleges. Like, we just didn't have to spend as much money because of the just good fortune. But now those visits is where we spend the money. It's not going to the high schools. It's bringing those kids here, because it's like speed dating. That portal happens, and then you got 10 days. Or I was talking about at the beginning of the semester, you got like 10 days to get, 50, 60 visits in. It's crazy.
And real quick, just to follow up, like it's kind of frustrating as a fan perspective to see some of those guys transfer interconference to, a Memphis, a Tulane that have more money, or because of the revenue distribution, than UAB.
I begged for a rule. The SoCon, which Chattanooga is in, Furman, Mercer, Sanford, they're in SoCon.
Yeah.
They have one. They're the only league that has one. And I applaud them so much for having the courage to do it. I begged, we had a meeting in Atlanta before the championship game, an ADs meeting of the American Conference ADs. And I challenged our commissioner. I said, we've got to have this. I said, it's bad enough when one of your best players gets into the transfer portal, you've lost them. But when you lose them to somebody else in your league, it's like you got worse and they got better. Like that, there's just something that doesn't feel right about that.
Right.
And I think about it. It's like, if you get worse and they get better, they're only going to use their better to keep propelling and maybe try to get another offer from a bigger conference to leave the conference you're in. Yeah. And the only reason, I'm glad you brought that up, John, because the only reason that is happening because the revenue distribution between the schools. Is there a time limit on that to where, okay, at a certain point that we're all going to make the same?
But it's like 7 years away.
Oh.
It's a 9-year. It's a 9-year ramp up, and we're in year 2.
Okay, all right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the coaching staff changes and additions for the UAB football team. And just to kind of go back before I ask my question, is that I recall, when Trent Dilfer was hired, being really excited about the name recognition and the background and just the notoriety and the attention that it would bring to UAB. And then it was kind of the weeks thereafter, what I had hoped to see was maybe Trent surrounding himself with some people at the coordinator level that had, Division I experience. And, fast forward a couple of years, and here's where we are. And there's been some really exciting additions. Like for me personally, when I think about an addition of someone like the defensive coordinator, Steve Russ, and his experience, defending the triple and, calling plays. And you think about one that really stood out to me was Ryan Lewis at cornerbacks, because I remember when his name was getting thrown around and I was like, hey, Ryan Lewis for defensive coordinator, that would be exciting. Look what he's done at Alabama State, and he's a recruiter and all this stuff. And we've got him in addition to Steve Russ. And then you've got this other NFL room, these people with experience, and we've kind of heard how that's helped and benefited in recruiting. Some of the guys we got in the defensive line, I don't know if we can even announce at this point, or, if we have, someone for defensive line coach, but regardless of that, we're starting to see a transition, a type, of player that we're kind of going after. We talked about recruiting. And I'm excited to see like what these NFL hands on this defense are going to be able to do in this 2025 season for UAB football. So to my question, Mark, what was your just overall like impression of like the changes, the additions that were made in the staff, and how do you see kind of some of that playing out for this upcoming year?
Yeah, well, I too am excited about what I've seen. Over the last 2 years, we've lost 18 staff to the NFL or Power 4 programs. And so when Trent first got here, I know there were certain questions about a certain number of staff, but he had more experience, and he was probably in the room and around him than he was given credit for. And I think because of a couple of key people that didn't have the experience, it's been created like it's this blanket, nobody has experience. But he made a lot of changes, mainly on the defensive side. Steve Russ, who you mentioned, he hired as defensive coordinator, and Ryan Lewis was a candidate for the job, who by the way, did a fantastic job in his interview. I sat in on it, really enjoyed him. He's got really good energy, which is an important quality in a coach, but particularly a defensive coach. And I think ultimately Steve Russ just had more experience. It wasn't, is Steve better necessarily? He just got more experience that was just hard to ignore. And in talking to Ryan about it, and when we interviewed him, he knew that whoever the coordinator was going to be able to hire their own staff, which is exciting to anybody to be able to do, rather than, hey, we're keeping all the assistants, we're only replacing you, and you got to come in and work with all these guys. You don't know them, they don't know you. You have a certain style that may or may not be their style. Anyway, in talking to Ryan, he knew that. So when we let him know that we decided to go in a different direction, he said, hey, would you consider me for one of the position coaches? Like, well, yeah, yeah, we would. And so he ended up interviewing with Steve. We let that happen, and Steve really liked him. And yeah, he's got great experience, did a fantastic job. I'm glad you said that at Alabama State. It's unfair. I think sometimes people say, well, they're FCS, HBCU, it's not the same level. Hey, man, but your competition is your competition. You got to go compete against that competition, right? It's not like he was playing against Ohio State. Don't compare him to how he had to, you know what I mean? His talent and competition, he had to go compete against and out scheme and out coach and out prepare. So I agree. He's great, and he's got great ties in our state that are good for recruiting. The NFL thing, in terms of experience, one coach that I used to work with, he spent 1 year in the NFL, and we had hired him back. We had him, and he went there, and we brought back. And I was just asking him about that time, and he said, man, he goes, I didn't know this until I did it. He said, coaching in the NFL is like getting a PhD. He said, because they don't have academics, they don't have recruiting, they don't have compliance meetings, they don't have to do any community service, they don't have to go across campus and talk to the dean or whatever. There's just absolutely none of that. All they do is talk football, and they go through every single possible scenario. It's first and goal from the 1, first and goal from the 2, from the 3, from the 4, right hash, left hash, middle. Like everything. We're backed up here, we're backed up there. He's like, there's no scenario that we aren't ready and prepared for, because all we do is talk about it. And so I think that's what you gain with these NFL guys. And then in recruiting, like I said, we still need to have good relationships with high school coaches. That hasn't changed. Unfortunately, it has been everywhere de-emphasized because you're spending so much time bringing in these portal kids. And you're like speed dating through Zoom calls. And so what the NFL thing has done for us, Darian, is, or Jimmy, whoever asked that, is they look, all these kids want to play at the next level. And being able to talk to a coach who's been at the next level that can go, hey, let me be real with you. If you think you want to play at the next level, here's what you've got to do. Here's what you're not good at. You're good at these things. You're not good at these things. So if you can improve here, you got a real chance. And the kid trusts and respects the guy, knows what he's talking about because he's just coaching, and they'll reference that player. They'll say, hey, man, I had that running back on our team. And let me tell you what he did every day. You want to be, if you think that's the guy you want to be like, you want to emulate that guy, let me tell you what that guy's life is like. Let me tell you what Derrick Henry's life is like every day. Let me tell you what his diet, his workout, his rest routine is. It's a job, and he treats it as such. And so that's what I think on the recruiting side, what the NFL experience has done. So it's all the situational football, let's call it, and then the gravitas that comes with. It's the greatest sports league in the world. I mean, what are we talking about?
And just hearing you talk about that gets me excited because I feel like we'll cover those same if they've already done it. I feel like you need that extra, whatever you want to call it, scheming to be able to have an extra advantage, especially here at UAB, to utilize the talent in a right way. And I think that's something that probably, in my opinion, that we probably needed. And if that gives us an extra edge, and I know you talked about recruiting. And one thing I did want to ask in that sense is you kind of already covered it earlier. But one guy I think about, because you brought up Cam Shanks, the one that hurt, but the one that really hurt me was Delano Townsend, right? I remember the story about how he got recruited and how his uncle had just posted the film on for Trent's Twitter, and they just checked it out. He didn't really have any offers really coming out of high school. And he came here, and I just remember just watching as he redshirted, he worked out. He worked so hard. And then I remember his progress as an offensive lineman. He would get in games, and then he started starting. And then he had some bumps and bruises. But his last 4 or 5 games, he really came on as an offensive lineman, right?
Yeah.
And I was just so excited about the kid. And then it was like, Ole Miss came around, right? And I'm just like, oh no, not this again, right? Not this. Yeah. And it got me to thinking, and you can't blame Delano. Listen, I come from the projects, and I come from just like single parent apartment. If you get, you're a redshirt freshman going into your sophomore year. If you get that big money offer, what's the logical thing to do here? That's what we play the game for, to be able to provide for our family, right? Yeah. I cannot blame him. What I did started thinking about was, what's the use of recruiting high school, especially here at a G5 program, a G4 program? What's the use if we're going to be used as a program, almost as a JUCO, right? Like it's a 1-year JUCO. If we put them on that stage, because that's what you build them up, that's what you develop them so you can play them. But it's almost like we're showing them off. Is there any kind of conversations or anything? I'm just trying to understand, because I really want to. I love homegrown kids.
Yeah.
But I don't want to have them for a year, right? and just I don't know if there's anything that can be done. I didn't know if that would just like take our recruiting philosophy almost to like strictly JUCO and strictly transfer portal. But so we can get more finished products instead of developing products for other conferences. Do you think that we'll be able to hold on to like high school products? I want to do it, but looking at the reality of it, I don't even know if it's possible.
No, not if they're great, like these 8 or 9 that we're talking about that we lost this year. Probably not. I mean, just to be candid with you, no, because, of the financial differences that you talked about with the SEC teams, between the $53 million per school that they get from their league, then layer in this new $20 million. They were like the SEC, they were already getting like $5 million per school from the college football playoff. Now they're going to get 25 per school. So they just have, they have history. They have larger alumni bases. They have, there's more money provided by called the institution. I don't mean the schools. I'm saying their conference or the CFP. There's just more money. They just have more. And so like if in the future rev share, if each one of our kids makes, don't take this number, anybody, as a number, just like if each one of our kids makes 20, each one of their kids is probably going to make 50,000 a year, just based on what we have. And so even if it's not this crazy $200, $500 million stuff, their kind of base pay is going to be greater than our base pay. And I think ideally we would be about 50-50, 50% high school, 50% transfer. That's where we'd like to be. But again, you have that plan going into the season. And at the end of the season, I mean, look, y'all, we were 3-9 and still lost 8 or 9 really good football players. So it's not like we're devoid of talent. So, but you go into the year thinking, okay, we know that John's going to graduate. We know Jimmy's going to graduate. We got to replace John and Jimmy. What we don't know is that, Darian, out of nowhere, you're that sophomore who's not graduating that gets some offer that you can't refuse. So we were already planning on having to replace Jimmy, the cornerback, and John, the linebacker, but now we got to replace you two, the center, who we didn't think we had to replace. We haven't been searching for a center. I mean, we're smart enough to know that there's no certainty in the game anymore, but we knew we had to replace these other guys. You with me? So we knew we were going to have to go to the portal to get them, or we had a high school guy that we think can be an immediate impact player. Maybe not be quite as fast as Jimmy, but he's close. Or he doesn't run routes quite as good as John, but he's close. But it will develop him, but he can play. It's when you get surprised unexpectedly, and that's when you next thing you know, without intending to, now you are heavier JUCO and transfer because you got more guys to replace than you thought you were going to have.
Hey, Mark, I got one more question about NIL because I think sometimes as fans, we are all guilty of like just comparing ourselves to, call it an Ole Miss or Alabama or the SEC teams, if you will. But I kind of think, and my question is, just generally speaking, like, how would you say we compare to our peers? You think about the other teams in specifically the area of like NIL, collective space. I know all this is not public, it's just not easy to go see, oh, Tulsa's budget, salary cap for the year is X. But, a lot of times I think we, guilty myself, you get a little sad. You see your guy go from UAB to Arkansas. Obviously, you're happy for them as well. But when you're just like generally looking across the landscape of, let's say, the non-power conference leagues, you're comparing a UAB to an FAU or UTSA, or you're comparing a UAB to a South Alabama or Troy or Georgia State, Southern Miss, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Is the gap really so wide at that level? What would you say as it relates to that?
Well, talking collectives in the American, Memphis, South Florida, and Tulane are outspending everybody else. We are competitive with everybody else. We're not competitive with those three. If those three, and frankly, Memphis is kind of by themselves, then you got South Florida and Tulane, and then you got everybody else. So like, I bet Memphis this year is in the 3.5, 4 million range for all sports. Okay. Mainly basketball and football. I bet South Florida and Tulane are maybe at 2 million. And I bet the rest of us are between 500,000 and $1 million. We kind of estimate that we're somewhere in the 750-ish range between football and basketball combined. And so I think we're competitive, like I said, with about, Army and Navy don't do it at all. So in football, take them out. They're not allowed to. So is what I say, three of the 12. So of the 9 of us, I think we're competitive with about 9 of us. So I don't think we're that bad. I just think that I think it's hard to ever know the real truth. And so even the numbers I'm giving you is based on what I think if the truth is. But coaches are funny, man. I mean, when they're together at their convention, it's like they're all best friends from the same fraternity. But as soon as they exit the hotel, they are mortal enemies, and they will lie to each other. They will tell each other. You know, I watched. This is an inside story, but I'll tell it anyway. So I won't name the coach. We have these in-person spring meetings in May every year, and so 2 years ago, Trent had not yet coached a game, and we were kind of after the meetings, after dinner, in the lobby, and a lot of people take their spouses, so which is I think is smart and is good to foster sportsmanship. I think those sound like here's an old Southern word for you. It sounds like a boondoggle, which I guess it is, but which is a sophisticated word for a trip that's not.
I was going to ask Mark, what is a boondoggle? I've never.
A boondoggle is a trip that we call a work trip. It's not really a work trip because it's more fun than it is work. It sounds like a boondoggle, but it's but the quality time that the coaches and the ADs all spend with each other, both like just me and our coaches, we don't get a lot of social time together, and then the coaches with each other, me with the other ADs. I think it's good for sportsmanship. But I don't know. It's in the evening, and we're kind of sitting around the lobby, and a football coach from another school says something. He asks Trent, "What's your highest paid player?" Now again, we're talking about 2 years ago when this was barely even a thing. Like we were still kind of like, are people really doing this? So Trent, he says, how much is going to be your highest paid player? And Trent's like, about 100,000. And he goes, how about you? And he goes, yeah, we're probably about 200,000. And I kind of watched that exchange. And an hour later, when we all kind of, all right, man, well, good night, good to see you. And I get up and I walk towards the elevator with Trent, and I go, who do we have making 100,000?
Who's that?
And he goes, nobody, but I don't want him to use it against us in recruiting. And I'm like, right. I was like, but you don't know the truth. This is my point. When you start talking about how much money we have or don't have or how much they have, hell, who knows what the truth is? And he goes, yeah, I know. I'm like, right. But
yeah. And it's funny you bring up like the coaches. I never know between them like what's like what are they doing? Like are they playing around? Like are they joking? Or because we saw I forgot what coach that was. He was like kind of Coach Summerall was kind of like trolling Trent on Twitter and just throwing because of the clip. It was talking about the money being spent and the recruiting, and I'm just like, are they joking? Are they just playing psychological, or is it psychological warfare? What is going on? So I think you're right. They live in their own world. I think they just kind of, we don't know what's going on the outside.
Yes. The answer
just to everything.
Is it this? The answer is yes.
Yes, I agree. I know we were kind of running late. I had one more question. I think vision is always a big thing, especially probably the most important thing, in my opinion, in the position you sit at. What is your vision of UAB's ceiling, and what do you want UAB's floor to be as a athletic department as a whole? It leads with football and basketball, but I just wanted to know what. I know it's a general, vague question, but I just wanted to know what you thought about that.
I've been here almost 10 years, and that exact question was one I would get a lot. And the answer is the same today as it was then, which is we want all of our teams to be in a position to compete for a championship. That doesn't mean championships are hard to win, but being in a position to win the championship is the key. So if you're always, let's say, in the top third, you're in a position to win the championship. If you're in the bottom third, you're not going to win the championship. But if you're in the top third of the sport in the conference, you have a chance to win the championship. And that's where we want to be. So then that falls on me to go, okay, now me and the coach, what are the things we need that we don't have to put ourselves in that top third? Some of our sports are in a position to do that. Let's just talk facilities. Football has what is still one of the best practice facilities even in the American. It definitely was in Conference USA, and it was far better than anybody in CUSA, and it's still it might still be the best. It's one of the best in the American. Our football stadium is second to none. I think Protective Stadium is arguably the nicest stadium in the entire country, regardless of who you're talking about. Not necessarily, that doesn't mean biggest, but there's amenities and sight lines and a lot of things that the public, like our locker room, and we have a recruiting room to host recruits. It's awesome. We got a private area for the head coach. It's like a living room to meet with the top 2 or 3 kids that are there that day. Like we've got it's a really well-designed building. So they're in a much better position, let's say, than our golf team. And we've got good history in golf, but our golf team, we got great golf courses. They don't have anywhere to practice. They don't have anywhere to just go hit balls. And so that's a problem. And so and tennis is that way. There's 4 tennis courts on our campus. It's shared by all students and the PE department for introduction to tennis. There's 4 tennis courts. We have 2 varsity tennis teams. It takes 6 courts to have a match. And we only got 4 courts. So they're not in a position to be successful the way that football is. We built the basketball practice facility for men's and women's basketball. That was a game changer in our ability to truly say to all of our players on both of those teams, you can take shots any time of the day, all day, every day, whenever you want. You can work on your game at all times. We always said it. It just wasn't true. Before that, when you had men's basketball, women's basketball, and volleyball practicing and playing all in Bartow on the same surface, well, you couldn't go shoot free throws while volleyball was having practice, right, on the same court. You couldn't do that. Volleyball coach like, hey, I'm trying to talk over here, and you're over to boom, 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 boom. You can't do that. So that's been a major improvement. We're about to renovate Bartow Arena to modernize that for our fans. That will really, it's really going to elevate the profile of all of our facilities. We've still got work to do there, but not to hang on the facilities front. But the goal is to be in the top third, regardless of what sport it is, top third all the time. And in doing that, then we're competing to win championships, which is what our expectation is. And we're capable of. And, we have a great school. We have a great city. Got a lot of talent kind of within a 5-hour region of us. We have the ability to go recruit internationally. We got, 11 to 12% of our athletes. We have almost 500 athletes. 11 to 12% are from another country. And so we're very appealing to international kids. So we have the ability to be great, and we just have to continue. I think the challenge in all that is we're still really young as a university and as an athletic department, and we can only overcome that in time. And why does that matter? Is to become the historical thought of historically as a place where you think of as thinking about sports. Memphis is about twice our age. We like to think of, us and Memphis as similar. We have a lot of similarities, but they are older than us. So they got a bit of a head start in terms of, again, just sort of like city loyalty and attachment to that team. And I think ours is improving. It just takes time. And then now this new investment. And so why do the number of graduates and alumni, why is that relevant? Well, because now we have this other new investment we're going to have to make in revenue sharing with our players. So it'll be harder to improve our facilities because we need to invest so much money there and so much of our time and energy in recruiting dollars for that purpose. So it's just a new challenge. That's what makes the job exciting. And but I firmly believe we can be the most dominant in the American. I really think that.
And Mark, we've got a lot of our listeners questioning us about scheduling, especially in football. Notice that, Tennessee's on the schedule for this 2025 season. As of now, recording, Friday, February 7th. There's no bye games scheduled in the future. Can we expect an announcement soon in regards to future bye games?
No, I wish. Didn't you hear that we're eliminating? That's why I was brought here, John.
Oh, there you go.
Have you heard? That was that's why I got hired. So here's the deal. The SEC, the Southeastern Conference, like a decade ago, started talking about, they play 8 conference games. They started talking about, should we play a 9th? And then, whoever, the AD from Kentucky would say, well, I've got games scheduled out, these guarantee games and stuff for X number of years. And then, well, AD from Ole Miss would say, we got them through 2035 or whatever. So Mike's live. And now Greg Sankey said, okay, stop scheduling them. So the year happened to be this upcoming season, fall of 25. Stop scheduling them beyond then so we can just have that conversation. Should we play another conference game? I met with Greg Sankey. So that's why we don't have one scheduled beyond this fall. We're on, there's about 5 of those teams that if they vote to stay with 8 games, which we hope that they do, we're on the list to be one of those. Oklahoma is one of them. I talked to their AD the other day, but they just don't know yet. I met with Greg Sankey back in December. He anticipates, these are his exact words, I think it's a first quarter decision by our AD. So I'm hoping that they will decide to stay at 8 or go to 9 by, let's just say, April 1st. And if they stay at 8, which we want them to, then we will immediately try to schedule. Again, there's several of their league members that we are being considered as the opponent for the years beyond this fall. So, we've got Tennessee this fall and hoping to have somebody else. And, we would certainly announce it once that's done. But that's why we don't have one is I should have also said, when football was eliminated in 2014, all future scheduling was also eliminated. So we had to build that thing back from scratch and could only go so far out. Again, so people go, well, how come you won't schedule Big 12? Well, because some of them, they were already scheduled. Like these things can get done at like 10 years, 12 years in advance. Sometimes that's what makes it tough. So there literally is not a game to be scheduled like that. And then people will ask John, they'll say, well, what if we got one of them to come here? Well, I love that idea, but remember this. You only have 12 games to win 6 and be bowl eligible, right? I would call bowl eligibility is your minimum goal. Once you become bowl eligible and you can consistently, be a team that expects to be in a bowl every year, now you start improving to be that championship, contender. But you've only got 12 opportunities. So this year, obviously, we're going to go fight like heck against Tennessee to try to win that game. But we know that the odds are not in our favor. We're at their place, big crowd, all that stuff. So it's a tough game. Let's just call it a tough road game, right? Not impossible. We beat LSU. It's not impossible, but a tough game. So if you say, all right, well, the odds are not in our favor. So now we've really got 11 games to win 6. If we were to play, doesn't matter who, Mississippi State's going to come here. The only way they're coming here is if we do what they call a home and home. They come here and we go there. All right. So when they come here, we're going to make $1.6 million this year from Tennessee. Okay. So you got to make that kind of money on top of what you would ordinarily make for a home game. So you really got to make about not $2 million, but probably close to $2 million on that one game, which would be hard to do. You start doing the math, 42,879 seats of protective, see what we'd have to charge our good fans to be able to make up that money, right? And then when you go to Starkville the next year, you get nothing. So from your budget standpoint, I got $2 million this year. Yay, that's good. But next year we go to Starkville, we got 0. So how do you fix that? Well, to fix that means we got to have Miami, the Hurricanes, come here. While we're at Starkville, Miami's here. And the following year, when we go to Miami, Mississippi State's here. Well, now we're playing 2 of those games. Right now we're playing 1, and in that scenario, now you're playing 2. So now you got 2 of these really hard, kind of extra hard games on your schedule of 12, which only makes it harder to get to your minimum standard of winning 6. And so we're putting ourselves in a tougher spot, I think, to be overall successful. When that schedule went away in 14, it was like, hey, we literally had no players, right? So we had no idea what our talent was going to look like or not. It was like, we need to get the easiest teams we can. Who is right now the worst? Well, not to be funny, but what was worse when I scheduled them in 15 and 16, by the time we played in 17 or 20, maybe they aren't going to be so bad. So you don't know what you're going to get. And it's like, man, we could be terrible talent wise. Well, we weren't, but we didn't know until we had them. And so that's the challenge with the scheduling. That's a long-winded answer, but that's the answer on why we don't have one beyond this season.
Yeah, and I'm
And
glad
I don't schedule basketball. Somebody asked once, they were like, I saw somebody say, I'm trying to ruin basketball, their schedule. Andy Kennedy does the basketball schedule. If you want to fuss at somebody, call Andy. He'll love that. He'll appreciate that I said that. But, we collaborate on the strategy, and his strategy is a good one. And it's that he tries to play teams like Vermont that he thinks are going to win their conference. Now, you got to go beat them, right? We didn't beat them. That's the problem. But if we had beaten a lot of the teams that we've lost to are teams he thinks are going to win their league, had we beaten them, it puts us in a position to get an at-large later. We just didn't win those games. I know they don't have the name that's as exciting as some, but getting those teams to come in here is really, we try, but it's just a challenge.
Well, guys, do y'all have anything for Mark?
I just want to echo Darian's statements from earlier. This has been a really enjoyable conversation. And just for our listeners, Darian mentioned this earlier. This is not the only time in which we've spoken with Mark. It won't be the last time we've spoken with Mark. Mark has been so kind to meet not just with us, but with lots of different UAB fans, alumni, former players, and the like. And we just appreciate that. I've had numerous conversations with Mark on the phone, to which he's been transparent. He's always been very open with his time. So I would encourage each of you that if you haven't, if you've got some questions or concerns or whatever those might be, like Mark has been very open to hearing those out and has UAB athletics best interests at mind. So please do what we have done. Do what we have done, meaning if you've got an opinion to voice, let Mark know. And I think that's a good first step. So again, thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. And I hope that we'll be able to have you on again in a future date.
Yeah, 100%, man. I really appreciate you guys too. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on your show, and I hope to do it again.
Yes. All right, Darren, you go ahead and close us out for today.
Hey, as always, go Blazers.